Are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure you're the most qualified person? It's not always worked out in the past. Maybe you want to reconsider this altogether. Hey, my friends, I was at a storytelling show last night, yet another one, and had the opportunity to make a new acquaintance, a friend of a friend who was a performing artist. And we got talking about the inner critic, perhaps the most creativity threatening critic there is. And he was struggling a lot with his inner critic, who was keeping him from doing things. And so he was asking my insight on it. And so I was thinking about it. We talked a bit about it at the point, and I was thinking about it later. And I came to the conclusion that my inner critic is not my enemy. The inner critic can be problematic. The inner critic can talk you out of a lot of different things. But I don't really see the inner critic as your enemy. The inner critic is there because they're worried for you, because they're worried truly not about whether or not you have the qualifications to do whatever it is you want to do, but rather how the world will receive what you're trying to do. They see the world as a dangerous place. They're fearful for how the world will respond to you and what that will mean to you, how that will devastate you. The inner critic is there to protect you. They see their job as providing bubble wrap around you creatively or whatever, to keep you from being harmed, to keep you from feeling bad about yourself. And so ironically, it's a bit of a preemptive thing. So when we were talking last night about the inner critic and the challenges therein, he asked me if I had an inner critic. And I said, oh, definitely. Yes, I most assuredly have an inner critic. I think we all do. And he was asking, does it get in the way? Does it keep you from doing things? And I was able to answer quite honestly, no, it doesn't. It's there. I hear the voice. I hear the voice questioning whether this is a good time to do this, whether I'm really capable of doing this. And there are definitely projects I've undertaken in recent years where I worried that I was insufficient to the task. The thing is, that didn't stop me from doing that. Didn't stop me from achieving what I needed to achieve for those tasks. I didn't let the inner critic stop me from moving forward. Part of that was having a conversation with my inner critic, reminding them of the things I had done in the past, what had led me to this opportunity to do this new thing. When I'm presented with a new magazine article that I have to write, particularly something that's much larger or something that's outside of my area of particular expertise, there's always a moment's hesitation. But I've had a lifetime of learning about other subjects, so I know I'm capable of learning. I have had a lifetime of moving my ego out of the way when I feel ignorant and asking for help, asking questions. So I know I can learn that way as well. And I've had a lifetime of moving my ego out of the way to go, I can't do this part. Can someone else fill in this section? Or can someone formulate the first draft for me so that I can better craft what's required? So I've got a long history of writing, of storytelling, whether it's science, whether it's creative art, or whatever. So that's part of the rational conversation. It doesn't always work. The inner critic isn't always the most rational creature because, again, they're afraid on my behalf, and fear can get in the way of rationality. So, in another way to address my inner critic and to ensure that I keep moving forward, I will periodically break the project down. So it's not about, if it's, let's say, a magazine article, it's not about writing a 3,000 word article on a subject I'm kind of hazy on. It's about doing a bit of research. I know how to do research to get better educated. It's about writing a paragraph based on that research. It's about writing a sentence based on what I think the opening's going to be. It's about writing that first word. It's about breaking it into a small enough chunk that you can almost have like this query with your inner critic that says, okay, I know you're worried about, can I accomplish the 3,000 words? Do you feel good enough that we can accomplish a paragraph about what we just read? Can we at least come up with a line that will get me to the next line? Can I just write the word of the subject? Can I write a header? If there are things that are formulaic in the structure of the article, can I do the formulaic bits? Can I put the structure in before tackling the bigger project? Because right now, I don't have to write a 3,000 word article. I need to write a 1 word article, a 1 sentence article, a 1 paragraph article, 2, 3, 4 paragraph articles. Count those words, knowing that the word count doesn't matter other than as a sign of progress, because ultimately, history also tells me if I'm assigned a 3,000 word article, my first draft is probably going to be about 4,000 words. And then the challenge becomes, how do I edit that down? How do I take the most salient parts? And that's a different task. This is a different part of my brain. That's something I'm not planning for when I'm facing the blank page. And so when I'm teaching, this is also what I'm trying to do with my students, right? When I give them permission to suck, when I give them permission to not do the page count of the assignment, to not do the word count of the assignment, if I'm asking them for 2 sentences to encapsulate their screenplay idea, the logline, I tell them if to do the assignment, they come up with 35 lines. Great. If that's what you've got, if by the time the project's due, you haven't edited it down, share it with me anyways, in whatever state it's in, because then we can start the conversation, then we can move forward. Right? It's not about getting it perfect. And this is something I'm constantly reminding myself. To help me with that, again, it's not about focusing on the final outcome that I'm aiming for, because I'm not there yet. I've got time for that. There's a window of opportunity here. And, yeah, you would like to write things, or you'd like to do your thing perfectly correctly on the first pass. But honestly, if this is a creative passion of yours, if this is a thing you really enjoy doing, then you enjoy the process probably more than you enjoy the outcome. So experiment, so tinker, so try things, so trip and stumble, as I've done several times in this video. It's not about getting it perfect. It's not even necessarily about getting it right. It's about getting it started. It's about opening the door. And the inner critic can be negotiated with. That voice inside your head that said, are you sure? You can reassure that voice that the world doesn't have to see whatever it is I'm doing, possibly ever, or at least until I'm ready to share it. And even if the world sees the thing I've done and feels it's insufficient for their expectations, that doesn't mean I did a bad job. That doesn't mean what I did was a waste of time. The external critics have less power over me than my internal critic does. And if I can negotiate with my internal critic, God knows I can negotiate with the external critics of the world, or at least figure out how to live comfortably alongside those folks. So when you hear that voice in your head that questions whether or not you should be doing this, whether or not you are the right person, or whether or not you even have the skill set to do something, take it into a smaller scale. Reassure your inner critic that you're just experimenting. Depending on what the thing is, sometimes your inner critic is actually your intuition saying, have you thought this through? And you know what? That's actually good advice, is think it through, but don't think too much, as we've talked about in a previous video. Do what you can do. Do what you can do now. And then see what you can do then. And then see what you can do then. It's not about everything. It's about getting started. It's about making tiny moves. Just like I make these videos. I start them, I stumble, and then I get into a groove. And I may stumble again, and that's okay. I've got a class coming up that I'll start to advertise eventually, again, out of your head and onto the page, for writers that want to write spontaneously, with no goal, just to write spontaneously, just to start telling stories spontaneously. I will go to other classes. I've got screenwriting classes starting up in May and June to do exactly this with more students, or returning students in some cases. And I will do this with myself. I have projects that I need to reinitiate, and I'll talk about those probably. In the meantime, have a nice conversation with your inner critic and let them know you appreciate their concern, but you're going to do it anyways. And then do it, whatever it is you want to do. You don't have to prove yourself to anybody. You don't even have to prove yourself to yourself. But I'm confident that when you start doing, when you start trying, you'll find out that you're actually much more capable, that you are the person that needs to do this, and that you're actually having fun in the process. Because the process is ultimately everything. Because once you've made an accomplishment, you just then move on to the next thing, which is, again, the process. So have a wonderful weekend. Have a wonderful week. Express yourself creatively. Talk to people about your passions. Talk to me about your passions. Leave a comment, and share this video with anyone else you know who seems to be a little hyper self-critical. I'd love to hear how you're all doing. Take care. Be well.